Hello, welcome back. So, we are going to continue to read the novel Lord of the Mysteries by Cuttlefish That Loves Diving, Volume 1 The Clown. Last time we read chapter 73, 74, and 75. So, we tracked down Ray Bieber and there was a battle. Also got ambushed. The team got ambushed by the clown, and Klein used the fog to free himself. So we'll continue with chapter 76 today. Okay. Chapter 76, dealing with the aftermath. Bang. The silver bullet traversed on the short distance of a few meters and accurately bore into the suited clown's neck. Large amounts of blood spewed out, dyeing his skin and bow tie red. The suited clown was unable to let out a cry as his throat seemed to produce sounds of him gasping for breath. He wished to raise his arm to divert the fatal wound, but his joints appeared to be filled with glue. His motions were slow and jerky. Bang. Having entered a half cogitation state, Clan was not stunned by the appearance of blood. He pulled the trigger once again calmly, as though it was his usual daily practice. A grisly hole appeared on the suited clown's forehead as crimson red spewed out. The luster in his eyes dimmed as the intricate revolver's might was far higher than what Clan had imagined it to be. As his knees buckled and his arms hung down, the suited clown gradually fell to the ground. His eyes were frozen with a dazed look. His body convulsed for a few times before he slowly relaxed and stopped moving. Having delivered a headshot, Client turned around in a cool manner. He spun his revolver and allowed the empty shells to fall down. Then, dressed in his black formal suit and half-top hat, he walked toward Eor Harson. He, pou- he pulled out the final silver demon hunting bullet in his pocket and inserted it into the revolver's chamber. The reason why he did not turn back to look at the suited clown's tragic fate was solely because of his discomfort with his first kill. However, it was necessary. He did not know what would happen if the suited clown was under the full control of the puppet. Furthermore, he did not dare risk entering Seal Artifact 2049's effective range. After all, no one knew if something odd would happen that prevented his self-rescuing luck enhancement ritual to fail. As for the items on the suited clown, Clan only cared if there was the so-called clown potion formula or the relevant clues. However, this was not something he was in a hurry to carry out. In a while, he could do it together with Dunn, Eor, and the company. If the Nighthawks had it, it also practically meant that he had it. There was no way that they would be unwilling to share the potion formula of Sequence 8. At most, he would be required to accumulate his contribution over time. After all, he had only become a seer recently. It would still be a long time until he fully digested it. As his thoughts churned, Client quickly walked next to Eor Harson. The gentleman in his grey trench coat struggled to sit up but failed at every try. He was covered in dust and mud from the fall. Mr. Harson, what do you need me to do? He asked, squatting down. He pointed the revolver in his hand at the ground in case of a misfire. Eor gasped for air and sighed. The monster was too strong. If not for its weakness, then he pointed at a sky blue metal bottle beside him and said in a self deprecating laugh, I was trying to consume some medicine, but my hand shook. The sky blue bottle was about the size of Lion's finger. It was not it was no longer than 5 centimeters long and a cap that hid spiral patterns that had fallen to the side. The liquid had completely spilled. Lion reached out pick up the bottle. As he looked at it with narrowed eyes, he answered helplessly, Mr. Hassan, there are only a few drops of it left in the bottle. Go to Borgia and search his body in his inner pockets. Eeyore said as he gasped for breath. All right. Clan stood up and casually asked, is this restorative medicine an item from mysticism? No, it only has certain restorative effects. The main goal is to stimulate our minds and squeeze out the potential of our bodies. It allows to maintain a decent state for a short period of time until we return, where we can receive treatment. Eeyore attempted to sit up only to fall again. Its name is Goddess's Gaze. Remember to let Bodja drink half a bottle. Clan did not delay any further as he turned around. He briskly arrived at Bodja, who was groaning in pain. Sky blue, he found the uniform sky blue metal bottle from the Nighthawk's pocket. After removing the cap, he carefully held the bottle to Bodja's mouth. Having sensed it, Bodja tried hard to open his lips. The bottle was held up as dark red liquid flowed in Bodja's mouth. Clan estimated the quantity and stopped just in time. Then he screwed the cap back on. The medicine was rather effective. It only took Bodja a few seconds after drinking it to regain the spirit in his eyes. Furthermore, he whispered, "Thank you." With that said, he pressed down on the ground as he slowly sat up. He first dealt with his wounds before walking to the unconscious Lorota and Dunn. Then he retrieved the goddess's gaze from Later's inner pocket. Lion returned to Eo's side and fed him the remaining half bottle. After Eo panted a few times, his action suddenly became nimbler. He stood up as though he had never been injured. I'll help Bolgia, help that partner of yours. The gentleman with the charm of a middle-aged man pointed at Leonard Mitchell. Klein had no objections to it. He turned around and joked to the poet Leonard. There's no need, I can drink it by myself. Leonard, with his disheveled hair, smiled as he raised the sky blue bottle. Upon seeing Leonard agilely get up by pushing up with one hand, Lion, who wanted to lampoons, was suddenly stunned. Leonard's injuries are lighter than I expected. He had the ability to consume the medicine from the very beginning. That also means that he could see me walk counterclockwise as I did the luck announcement ritual. No, that's still all right. I had chanted inwardly, and the luck enhancement ritual does not appear odd in any way, or the suited clown would not have fallen for it. But even so, Leonard, who had long recovered but chose to watch by the sidelines, had seen quite a lot. Things like me not being affected by 2049 and my sneak attack on the suited clown. Just as Client's eyes narrowed slightly, Leonard, who was walking in his direction, stopped beside him and chuckled softly. I actually wanted to save you, but discovered that you didn't need it. Don't mind it. There are many special people in this world, that can always do things others can't, such as you and me. Leonard smiled as he went past Klein and walked to the awakening Dunn and Lorota. Narcissist. Klein thought silently as he felt a lot more relaxed. From the looks of it, Leonard Mitchell hid quite a bit of secrets. As he regrouped with the rest while deep in thought, he saw Captain Dunn wear a glove and pick up the Antigonus family notebook that was covered in yellowish brown bloodstains. The notebook's cover was completely made of thick black paper. It suffused an aura from an ancient and distant time without any signs of softening or rotting. It was indeed identical to the one he saw in his dream. He even suspected that flipping it open would make him see the fool wearing splendid headgear. However, he soon realized he was overthinking things, since Dunn had flipped open the notebook to make a final confirmation. Klein was unable to discern the words on it due to his poor angle, but he was certain that there was no drawing of the fool with his gorgeous clothes and splendid headdress. There's nothing wrong with it. Dunn closed the notebook and held it securely. Then he looked at Ayer and Company. Let's store this notebook and sealed artifact 2049 behind Pingin's Chanis gate. We can wait until all of you are recovered or Backlund send someone over. Upon hearing that, Clan felt a little disappointed once again, but also felt happy. He wished to see the Antigonus family's notebook once more and figure out the reason for the death of the original client, Welch and Naya. However, he also felt that the ancient item was filled with misfortune. It often brought catastrophe, uh, so he did not dare touch it. Handing it to the church's headquarters and sealing it is considered the best choice. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief. All right, your Hassan, Boja, and Lorota nodded in unison. Then they then turned around and arrived beside the sealed artifact 2049. They woke each other up and stuffed the puppet, which had resumed moving, into the black chest with an opening as they monitored it strictly. Everything is back to normal. Eeyore sounded a little more relaxed. Inside the dimly lit black chest, the puppet, wrapped in oil-stained clothes, flipped over with its body creaking as it aligned its claw-painted face with the light source. On the creepy face under the black pupilless eyes, two hardly noticeable crimson cracks appeared. Meanwhile, Dunn, Leonard, and Klein, who had mustered his courage, began searching the suited clown's corpse. They found paper flowers, handkerchiefs, poker cards, glass pieces, and all sorts of strange items. However, apart from that, he did not seem to carry anything of worth or potential clues. Other than the wallet with 70 to 80 pounds and 10 plus soli, Lion secretly sighed. With money in, with money in his mind, he immediately looked down and inspected himself. His face nearly fell, literally. His formal suit that cost several pounds had torn in 5 to 6 spots, which required mending due to his rolling on the ground. Furthermore, it was covered in dust and dirt stains. Dunn shot him a glance as the corner of his lips curved up. Losses during a mission can be reimbursed. Reimbursed? Upon hearing the term invented by the Emperor Rossel, Klein instantly felt wonderful. Yeah, this suit needs some proper cleaning and mending before it can be worn again. It will still be presentable. When the reimbursement comes, I can buy another set and I can take turns wearing them. I'm not the kind of person that uses reimbursement for something other than what it was intended for. However, I should consider getting a set of clothes for combat in the future, such as a black trench coat like Captain. Clothes with slightly poor material would be much cheaper than a tuxedo. This has the reason why the bastard Leonard. Uh, next page, what's happening? Has the reason why the bastard Leonard doesn't like wearing formal suits been due to him having such considerations? Let Fry take care of the dead body. We'll see if we can find what the man originally looked like or find any relevant clues. Dunn touched the suited clown's face paint with his gloves. Then they searched the innermost warehouse and saw that there were splotches of bloody flesh that looked like they had been smashed by boulders. They also saw one white bone after another that had been strewn everywhere. Ray Bieber was absorbing the power in the notebook via an ancient ritual, just like how we would consume an higher level sequence potion. A ritual like that is full of danger. It must be performed in an environment isolated from all disturbances, and the ritual would have required him to enter a deep sleep for a certain amount of time. That was probably why he had yet to leave Tingen. Dunn guessed at the possibilities after inspecting the warehouse. Upon hearing such a description, Lorota laughed. Her hair contrasted sharply with her pale face. Such a pity we awakened him ahead of time. His anger at being woken up truly left a deep impression on us. This is a kind of losing control. Dunn looked toward Klein and told him, just as both both as an explanation and a lecture. Why didn't he just leave Tingen and try to absorb it elsewhere? Asked the perplexed Klein. Eeyore laughed and pointed to his head. People influenced by an ancient or sinister past are often lacking in this department. At that moment, Dunn inhaled and said while hiding his pain, Leonard, you are still in a good condition. Stay here and do not allow ordinary people to come close. The rest of us will immediately search for items among Ray Beaver's remains. We'll return with them and the sealed artifact as well as the Antigonus family's notebook. We will then get Friar Royal and the police to come here. Chapter 77. Remnant Items. All right, answered Leonard with a relaxed expression when he heard Dunn's suggestion. Following that, everyone walked out of the warehouse and came close to where Monster Beaver had self destructed. With him at the origin, they began searching outwards radially. Captain, what are we looking for? Clan looked at the rotting flesh and blood that was strewn everywhere. He held back his urge to retch as he looked at Dunsmith beside him ponderingly. Dunn did not look up. Instead, he used his deep grey eyes to sweep the ground, awakening ahead of time, losing control, and becoming a monster. This means that Ray Weaver did not fully absorb the Beyonder powers provided by the notebook. It also means that a part of his body is considered extraordinary, making it prime material. If you ever encounter something similar, make sure not to miss out on doing a search. It might be a relatively important item. So that's the case. Klein nodded slightly in enlightenment. In the blink of an eye, he thought of another matter. If the part where Monster Bieber had concentrated the Beyonder pass were some indescribable part, wouldn't that be awkward? Uh, wouldn't it be extremely disgusting to concoct it into a potion? Just as Klein's mind wandered, Borgia, with his sharp, eagle-like eyes, suddenly shouted, "Found it!" Dunn and company immediately turned and closed in. Driven by his curiosity, Klein walked over to Borgia with quickened pace. He soon saw the item before Borgia. It was a grayish-white item with the size of a fist, about the size of a fist. Its surface was filled with gullies and it looked soft and ductile. It looked like a brain that had been extracted out of a living being. Although Klein was unable to make out the extraordinariness of the blob of grayish white, he was certain that Borgia had not made a mistake since it remained intact despite the violent explosion it had undergone. Dunn carefully observed it and squatted down. As he extended and bent his right arm, he used his gloved left hand to carefully grab the grayish white item. The moment it was touched, the blob of grayish white immediately spread out into extremely sticky liquid. At that moment, Johansson took out a tin-colored square case, removed the cigarettes from them, and placed them into his pocket. Then he handed the square case to Dunn and smiled. "I know, you only like pipes." Dunn chuckled and took the square case. Then he poured the grayish-white sticky liquid into the case for temporary storage. After storing it away, everyone did a cursory sweep of the area. After confirming they had not missed out on anything, they left. When they came out, they saw horses digging their hooves into the ground, clearly spooked and nervous. They had nearly escaped the their reins. "I'll drive." Borgia covered his mouth with his hand and coughed softly. "I know you're good at placating animals." "Placating or placating?" "Placating," said Eeyore with a smiling nod. After boarding the carriage, Dunn, Lorota, Earharson, and Klein, who continued their arm exercises, temporarily had nothing to say as they fell into silence. When the trotting of horses when the trotting of horses sounded while the carriage wheeled off, Dunn looked at Klein and deliberated over his words before saying, "I know you're filled with curiosity about the Antigonus family's notebook. You wish to understand what happened." "No, not at all," Klein subconsciously denied. "It was an ancient relic filled with misfortune." Without giving him time to answer, Dunn continued and said, "However, I have to first report this to the Holy Cathedral. Only after they determine that the confidentiality level of the notebook can we consider if this can be shown to you." "No problem." Clan gave a short and simple reply. Then continued his arm exercises as he thought before saying, I was promised that can be made a formal member of the Nighthawks when we confirm that Ray Weber is a descendant of the Antigonus family clan. Now, not only have we determined Ray Weber's identity, we have even eliminated the monster and spoiled the secret order's conspiracy. In this entire process, your performance was outstanding. You personally killed a member of an evil organization. Therefore, I'll fulfill my promise and immediately make an application to the Holy Cathedral. We'll wait for their approval. Right, I forgot something important. I still need to ask you if you are agreeable to it. Mr. Clan Moretti, are you willing to formally join the Tingen Nighthawks as one of its members? Your salary will increase several fold, reaching £6 a week. Furthermore, you'll get a raise every subsequent year. Your salary will be paid by the church and our county's police department equally. You'll also gain the identity of a probationary inspector. It will be very useful at times. As a support type Beyonder, you do not always need to face enemies, but you will have to guard Chanis Gate once a week. Without the Scots' permission, you are not to leave Tengen. Furthermore, you have to keep the secret from your family. By the time Dunn finished listing the restrictions and benefits, Klein was already thinking deeply for more than 10 seconds. I wish to become a formal Nighthawk. Only by doing so could he continue to gain more access to the mysteries, such as the situation regarding the secret order. After reading the gathered Roselle diaries, Klein had some changes in thoughts and about himself. Being skilled in mysticism knowledge, Being skilled in mysticism knowledge to seek a way home was an immutable goal of his. Raising his strength further to more safely make the mysterious space above the grey fog do his bidding before using it to return home was a new addition to his goals. Just as Emperor Russell said, simply relying on external powers was very dangerous. Furthermore, after becoming a seer and obtaining beyond the powers, Klein sensed that he had better grasp of the mysterious space. For example, he could pull another person into the gathering. This forced him to consider what possible beneficial changes would happen to the mysterious space above the grey fog when he reached sequence 8, sequence 7, or even higher sequence. Of course, Klein knew very well that this was built on premise that he completely resolved the side effects of the seer potion. He could not rush or be rash. Very well, once the Holy Cathedral approves of it, you will become one of us. Dunn's grey eyes were tinted with a hint of joy. At that moment, Eo Hansen, was listening, interrupted. Klein, don't mind me calling you Klein. Your performance today was really excellent. You managed to kill a Beyonder from the Secret Order. I even suspect that he had reached Sequence 7. How did you do it? I really find it incredible. Question had finally been raised. Having long prepared for it, Klein acted as though he was organizing his thoughts. He knew that it was indeed incredible and enigmatic that he had killed a Beyonder that ran rings around Air, Dunn, and Lorota. Air and company were not blind and dumb, so it was a matter of time before they inquired about the process. However, he never expected them to wait until this moment. That's right. Captain and Mr. Hassan were previously injured and their situation could have worsened at any time. At that moment, any matter that could result in conflict had to be put on hold. It was to prevent me from acting desperately because of my exposed secret. Only after I expressed my attitude and showed that I was willing to be a nighthawk were they at ease enough to ask. How crafty. They did not have any obvious communication between themselves, but they had made the same tactic decision. Klein answered as though in thought. It was an extremely lucky event. The clown in the tuxedo had made a fatal misjudgment. Back then, the sealed artifact 2049 was thrown near me as a result of the explosion's blast. It looked about 5 to 6 meters from me, but it was only a crude observation. It was very easy to come to the conclusion that I was within the sealed artifact's area of influence. And back then, I was feeling faint because of the explosion. My actions turned sluggish and looked as though I was being controlled. It was unknown when that suited clown came close to me in an invisible state. He tried to entice me by offering to save me and the corresponding sequence 8 clown of the seer portion. He wanted to help me retrieve the Antigonus family's notebook. Right? He said that the secret order is in control of the seer potion's corresponding sequence pathway and that he was once a seer. Klein recounted the situation back then in detail. He even described the theories he had back then, including how he believed that the suited clown had divined taking the notebook, which would be an extremely risky endeavor. Thus, he had changed his plan. Of course, all the truths were used to conceal the lie made in the beginning that he had been controlled by sealed artifact 2049. Divined that it was extremely risky to retrieve the notebook? Yes, it's indeed highly risky. However, the risk was actually because of you, said Lorota with a chuckle as she covered her mouth. His divination was right, but it caused him to end up in a fatal situation. This sure is an interesting account. Klein was taken aback before he nodded seriously. Indeed, divination is never crystal clear. Divination is never crystal clear, and that vagueness only means that an interpretation can be wrong. Yes, I have to take note of that. How did you finish him off after that? Asked Dunn when he did his arm exercises and leaned back. Clan smiled. I pretended to agree with him and made him awaken me. However, he did not enter the effective range of the sealed artifact. He stayed 2 or 3 meters away and used a strange paper slip in an attempt to push me. I seized the opportunity and pulled at his paper slip, causing him to be thrown into 2049's effective range. Then I complemented it with repeated shots and completed my goal. It's quite an embarrassing matter for me. I didn't have the confidence of hitting him despite only 2 or 3 meters away from him. Eeyore nodded slightly. With his evasive abilities, a distance of 2 or 3 meters is not an absolute guarantee. You might be able to strike him but fail to hit him in vital spot. That would only make things worse. Your choice back then was impeccable. It can even be said to be outstanding. If I were in your shoes, I might not have been able to do it better than you. He did not ask further. After all, the suited clown's entry into the sealed artifact 2049's area of influence basically sealed his fate. He became a living target. The subsequent sequence of Seer is clown. How odd, Dunn said. Dunn suddenly said with a sigh. Chapter 78, Trauma. Earhausen added, exactly. It is hard to imagine that the subsequent sequence of Seer would be clown. According to normal logic, no one would think them. Think, according to normal logic, no one would link them together. Is that strange? I remember that quite a number of sequence portions also seem to lack similarities between their different levels. Loroda covered her mouth as she yawned. It was obvious that her injuries were more severe. Not even Goddess's gaze could help her maintain her vibrant energy. No, Lorota, this is completely different. Even if the other sequence portions are lacking a connection, we can also find common points if viewed from different angles. However, I cannot comprehend it for Seer and Clown at all, said Eorhasen as she shook his head and sighed. Klein listened to their discussions and laughed. No, there's still a common point. What? Eor asked, curiously. Even Dunn's arm exercises clearly slowed down. Klein replied without hesitation. Be it a seer or a clown, both of them can be found at the circus. Eor, Dunn, and Loretta was stunned. Quite a good answer. I like young men like you. Loretta was first to return to her senses as she burst out laughing. Eor also smiled as he shook his head. In this era, the number of gentlemen who are equipped with spirit of self-deprecation is decreasing. Thankfully, we have met one today. Do you think I like to engage in self-deprecation? It's not like I figured out any common commonality between the two, Klein complained internally as he replied with a wry smile. I only wish that the portions of sequence pathway would not have names like beast tamer, acrobat, or magician. That would really form a circus. Furthermore, it's a one-man circus. Ah, Dunn and company were immediately amused. It filled the carriage with a joyous atmosphere. The carriage proceeded straight for Zotland Street. Klein, who was not injured, was the first to enter Blackthorn Security Company. Goddess, what happened to you? Why are you like that? Roseanne exclaimed when she caught sight of him. Klein looked down at his dirty and tattered suit. He replied with his head aching. There are always all kinds of accidents during a mission. Thankfully, the goddess blessed us and it ended beautifully. Praise the lady. Roseanne devoutly drew the crimson moon across her chest. Before waiting for Klein to continue, she asked, do you need us to hide in the third floor again? Is the sealed artifact really that dangerous? Trust me, it's far more dangerous than you can imagine, replied Klein with a lingering fear. If not for his even more mysterious luck enhancement ritual, he would have perished under the pro- proverbial hands of 2049. Goddess. Roseanne's lips quivered as though she had a million things to say and questions to ask, but in consideration of how the captain was waiting downstairs, she held back her compulsion. She informed Mrs. Oriana and the company to head upstairs to the third floor. The neighbors of Blackthorn Security Company were either estates of church or devout, devout clergymen who vaguely knew of the situation. When all the civilian staff dispersed, Klein did not rush to the recreation room to inform the other Nighthawks. He immediately returned and helped the captain and the rest escort sealed artifact 2049, Monster Beaver's remnants, and the Antigonus family's notebook to the second floor. Through the partition, Dunn pushed open the recreation room's door and said to the two Nighthawks who were playing Gwent cards, Fry, Royal, both of you are to immediately head to the harbor's Tyrell warehouse and aid Leonard in dealing with the aftermath. All right, Royal, with her raven black hair and cold expression, was first to stand up. Cops collector Fry, with his black hair, blue eyes, and pale skin, stood up next. They put down their Gwent cards and walked out of the recreation room, and when they passed through the partition, they clearly paused. Wait, Dunn shouted, not letting down their expectations. What else is there? Sleepless Royal turned her head back and asked without an expression. Remember to inform the police. Let them seal off the road. Prevent anyone from coming close until you are done with the scene and move the cops back, Dunn said, smacking his forehead. All right. Royal turned around and took 2 steps before pausing once again. She turned her head, blinked, and confirmed coldly. Captain, is there nothing else? No, Dunn answered categorically. Royal nodded unnoticeably and walked towards the entrance. As for the corpse collector Fry, who exuded coldness and darkness, he maintained his adequate pace. At that moment, Dunn added, remember to tell Roseanne, Mrs. Oriana, and the company that they can come down. No problem, Fry calmly replied as though no emotion stirred in him. Klein watched as two Nighthawks walked to the door and went upstairs before heaving a secret sigh of relief. He followed the captain and the rest underground. They proceeded straight to the Chanis gate. As Dunn gestured for the sleepless Kenley to open the Chanis gate, he, he instructed Klein, go to the armory and get old Neil here. We need his ritualistic magic to heal ourselves. As the effect of the medicine began to wear off, his mental state gradually waned. All right, Klein did not wait for the captain to continue. As he added, I'll watch at the armory and old Neil's place. I will also request for an additional 12 demon hunting bullets and also wait for the Holy Cathedral's approval, curbing my curiosity about the Antigonus family's notebook. Dunn was instantly at a loss for words. Captain, is there anything else? Klein asked with a smile after beating Dunn to it. Dunn shook his head and remained speechless. He pulled out his cane and turned around. After walking a certain distance, Klein returned to the armory and next page. Recounted the happenings generally to old Neil, who was drinking plain water. He became a monster that lost control. You even killed a beyonder? Old Neil quickly tidied up his desk. It's like I'm listening to a script of a play, he mumbled as he circled around the desk and walked straight towards the corridor without waiting for Klein's answer. Klein asked out of curiosity, Mr. Neil, does the church have real restorative medicine? Why would ritualistic Mr. Neil, doesn't the church have real restorative medicine? Why would the ritualistic magic be needed? No medicine made with ordinary ingredients can provide the permanent restorative effects of a ritual. Extraordinary ingredients are very rare and most of them are not suitable for restorative medicine. Client Old Neil explained casually. You should know about the goddess's gaze, right? When the medicine is first made via a ritual, it would be a standard real restorative medicine. But every minute after its completion, if its effect evaporates until little of its efficacy is left. I see, Klein nodded disappointedly. As a former keyboard warrior and an avid gamer, it was the habit to yearn for a medicine with magical healing properties. He watched old Neil leave and sat down, taking in the tranquility that he had not had in a very long time. It, in the midst of his piece, he recalled the tragic death of the suitor clown. He recalled himself shooting coldly, the gruesome wound, and the spewing of fresh blood. Client's body shivered as he felt the discomfort. He first stood up, then sat down, then slowly repeated the process. He also did some pacing back and forth in between. Phew. He let out a breath and decided to occupy himself with something so that he could stop thinking of those negative images. Klein took off his silk hat and formal suit. He then took out a handkerchief and brushed to clean off the dirt and mud. After a certain amount of time, he heard old Neil's familiar footsteps. Old Neil's gait involved him walking on his heels, and it made a distinctive noise as he ambled down the hall. How tiring, old Neil complained as he walked into the room. Tell the rest that no one is to come here within the next hour. I need to rest, he instructed casually, glancing towards Klein. Why don't you rest upstairs? I, and I keep watch here? Klein suggested out of kindness. Old Neil shook his head. It's too noisy upstairs. Roseanne is a lady who just can't stop talking. All right, Klein did not insist. He put on his coat and hat, picked up his cane, and returned to the corridor. Then he pulled the armory's door ajar. Tap, tap, tap. He slowly walked on the empty path when he suddenly saw many rooms he had never seen previously by the side. There is a secret door here. Klein stopped at a spot around the bend as he looked at the room. He discovered that corpse collector Fry had already returned. He was carefully examining a completely dissected corpse. Klein's heart stirred as he mustered his courage and approached the room. He knocked lightly on the open door. Knock, knock, knock. Fry stopped his action and turned around, looking over with his blue but ice cold eyes. Sorry for disturbing you. I just wish to know if this is the corpse of a beyonder, asked Klein as he controlled his tone. Yes. Fry's lips opened and closed, but he only spat out a single word. Klein's gaze reached beyond him and landed on the corpse. Indeed, he discovered the familiar gruesome wound on the forehead. It's that suitor clown. Klein secretly exhaled and said, Any discoveries? No, answered Fry in an abnormally simple manner. The mood instantly turned awkward. Just as Klein was about to bid farewell, Fry took the initiative to say, If you feel uncomfortable, you can come in to take a look. You will discover that it's only a corpse. Afraid that I'll be traumatized? Client nodded as though in thought. All right. He entered the room and came in front of the long white cloth table as he looked at the corpse. The suited clown's red, yellow, and white paint had been cleaned off, revealing an unfamiliar face that did not look anything special. He was in his 30s and had black hair and a high nose bridge. At that moment, Fry went to a square table by the corner of the wall and picked up a pencil and piece of paper. He returned to the corpse and placed the paper down and began drawing with a pencil. Klein glanced at it with curiosity and found that Fry was sketching the suited clown's head. It did not take long before Fry stopped moving the pencil. On the piece of paper, there was a lifelike portrait. Compared to the corpse, the only difference was the lack of wound with the addition of blue eyes. What a talented genius! Klein marveled in surprise. I never expected you to be that good at sketching. My dream was to become an artist before becoming a nighthawk. Fry's tone was completely placid. Then why don't you fulfill your dreams? Klein asked curiously. Fry put down his pencil and said with suited clown's portrait at hand, my father was a priest of the goddess. He wished that I become a priest. It's a presentable job. You became a priest? Klein asked in surprise. He found it unimaginable that Fry would become a priest with his personality and the vibes he exuded. Yeah, I did quite a okay job. Fry wore a cold expression as the corners of his mouth curled up a bit as he replied, later I encountered and experienced some things and ended up a nighthawk. Klein did not plan on infringing on his privacy, so he asked, you were once a priest of the goddess, so why not choose to be a sleepless? A personal reason, answered Fry frankly. Furthermore, Madame Daly is a good role model. And nodded, and just as about he was about to change the subject, he heard Fry say, help me watch this room. I have to immediately hand the sketch to the captain. Closing a secret door is very troublesome. All right. Although Klein was a little afraid of facing the cops alone, he braved his fear in agreement. With Fry gone, the room turned quiet. Cops laid there as Klein's heart turned heavy. He took a few breaths and a bit to defeat his fears, he approached the long table. The suited clown lay there silently with his pale face. His eyes were tightly shut and he had lost all signs of breathing. Apart from the gruesome wound, he emitted the unique coldness of a dead man. Klein observed for a moment as his emotions gradually settled as he was calming down. He swept his gaze and discovered a strange brand on the suited clown's wrist. Gathering his courage, he extended his hand to touch it, hoping to turn it around to see it more clearly. Just as the ice cold touch reached from Klein's fingertips to his brain, the pale palm that had lost all vibrancy shot up suddenly, grabbing him by the wrist. It grabbed his wrist tightly. Oh, that's quite a cliffhanger. Okay, we have to stop here for today. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Have a good day.